All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we are unpacking a really highly debated video from the channel Freedom Insight. Now this video maps out a pretty complex web involving late-night host Jimmy Kimmel, the Trump family, and a massive, fierce debate over media accountability. And look, we're not here to take sides. We are strictly breaking down the claims and the exact timelines presented by the source material just so you can understand exactly what is driving this whole controversy. Let's get into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover the Kimmel controversy, how the Trumps responded, the arguments around rhetoric and political violence, the network fallout, and finally, the broader media bias argument.
Okay, part 1, the Kimmel controversy, the monologue that sparked a firestorm.
So this entire firestorm really traces back to one specific late-night monologue that aired just days before the White House Correspondents Dinner. Jimmy Kimmel targeted former First Lady Melania Trump, saying she had a glow like an expectant widow. Now, the Freedom Insight commentator frames this not as edgy comedy, but as an absolutely disgusting comment regarding the potential death of a former president.
And in that exact same monologue, Kimmel directed his aim at Stephen Miller, comparing him to a time-traveling baby Hitler. According to the source, this specific rhetoric crossed a hard, undeniable line. It went from political satire straight into targeted hostility, and it acted as the absolute primary catalyst for the massive public backlash that followed.
Moving right along to Section 2, the Trumps respond calls for corporate accountability.
Well, the pushback from the Trump family was incredibly swift. Taking directly to X, Melania Trump asserted that Kimmel's words actively deepen what she called the political sickness within America. And the source makes a point to emphasize that this was actually her second strong public stand in just 2 weeks. By explicitly telling ABC to take a stand, she took this from just criticizing a comedian to demanding actual corporate accountability from the parent network. President Trump immediately echoed his wife's sentiment. And he didn't mince words at all. He demanded that Disney and ABC fire Kimmel on the spot. He categorized the monologue not just as a failed joke, but literally as a despicable call to violence. And you know, this right here introduces the absolute central tension of the video. Should corporate media police its own talents?
Which brings us to part 3, rhetoric and political violence, connecting words to real-world actions.
According to the commentator, the severity of the situation escalated from abstract late-night jokes to terrifying real-world reality almost overnight. Because shortly after Kimmel's monologue, an armed intruder carrying a shotgun, a handgun, and knives actually attempted to force his way into the White House Correspondents Dinner ballroom.
So what does this all mean? The source asks us to consider a really heavy question here. Does daily media rhetoric actually inspire political violence? The video strongly suggests that when media figures repeatedly frame politicians as existential threats, unstable individuals essentially absorb that background radiation, and they feel totally justified in taking violent action.
To back up this claim, the video points directly to statements from Caroline Leavitt. She asserted that the would-be assassin's manifesto was virtually indistinguishable from the daily media sludge consumed on television night after night. The argument being made here is that violent actions are not happening in a vacuum. They are, supposedly, a predictable result of hostile rhetoric that gets normalized by mainstream entertainment.
Okay, let's look at Section 4, the network fallout, FCC warnings, and affiliate boycotts.
We need to track this timeline because the institutional fallout moved incredibly fast. Regulatory pressure kicked off around September 17th with a formal FCC warning to ABC and Disney. Boom. Immediately, Kimmel is pulled off the air indefinitely. Now, while the show did return by the following Tuesday, local television affiliates, specifically Sinclair and Nexstar, instituted their own boycotts. They completely refused to air the show until September 26th. It was a massive, unprecedented disruption in the corporate broadcast system. The source also adds another really interesting layer to the controversy involving Erica Kirk. After Kimmel allegedly made false statements regarding the murder of her husband, Charlie Kirk, he offered an apology and floated a potential show appearance. She flat out refused. The source praises her incredibly graceful response, where she stated, "If you want to say I'm sorry to someone who's grieving, go right ahead. But if that's not in your heart, don't do it." The video uses this exact moment to contrast the dignity of those targeted against what they perceive as the total insincerity of late-night hosts.
Finally, we hit Section 5, the media bias argument. Who pays the price? At this point, the video zooms way out to draw a very sharp cultural contrast. The argument claims that a liberal media elite lives in this protected bubble, hypocritically lecturing the rest of the country about tolerance while actively sneering at working-class Americans who are treated like garbage.
It's a very stark us versus them framing, which the source argues is intentionally perpetuated by broadcast networks.
But why does any of this matter to you and me? Well, the video argues that the massive financial burden of this escalating rhetoric falls directly on regular taxpayers. We are the ones who end up paying millions for extra Secret Service details, massive security barricades, analyst police overtime, and sprawling investigations. Meanwhile, parent companies like Disney are enjoying billions in revenue without facing the financial fallout of the rhetoric they broadcast. And beyond the money, the video argues the ultimate, devastating cost is the total destruction of public trust.
Which brings us to the end, and we leave you with the video's final, provocative thought. Will corporate media actually step up, draw a line, and hold their hosts accountable for corrosive rhetoric? Or are we simply surrendering to a completely divided system that now runs entirely on suspicion rather than any shared reality? The source definitely leaves its audience wondering if unity is even possible anymore. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.